Uh, yes, we're here. Hello.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. We've got a lot of people in the waiting room, so we'll wait a couple of seconds before we start to greet you. I would do a little dance, but there's no music today, so there's that. All right.
Oh,
All right, let's get started. So we've got 30 minutes to fill you in on everything that's going on. This is Eye on ESI. I am Maribel Rivera. I am the VP of Strategy and Client Engagement, which is just fancy to say that I'm here to serve the community, the ACEDS community and legal community at large on a global scale. I am joined today by Mike Quartararo, ACEDS President, and by Jared Coseglia, CEO and founder of True Staffing Partners. How are you both doing today?
fantabulous.
Awesome. Are we
Terrific.
ready to get this holiday season kicked off for everyone with some great numbers?
Chin chin.
Chin
Chin
chin.
chin.
I like it.
It's
In case,
coffee. It's
in
coffee.
case you
I
missed,
like it.
Not egg yog. It's not quite nog time yet, but maybe
No,
maybe in our December ion.
I'm gonna send you some coquito. You need some coquito in your life.
Please do.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. So Jared, let's kick
I'm a
it off.
bourbon guy. Sorry.
Hey,
And before you start, Jared, I just want to mention for anyone, we've got a lot of new registrants. We just want to mention we've got 30 minutes, but that doesn't mean that we're just going to do all the talking. We want to hear from you. Throw your questions in the chat, throw your questions in the Q&A. We're going to answer them, whatever we can't answer, but we try to answer them all. We will get to next time or in email. So now, Jared, kick us off.
So our 2024 jobs report is just about expired. We're coming to the end of the year. If you haven't read it yet, check it out. But we're going to do a 2025 jobs report. So you have that to look forward to. It's going to have a lot of new stuff in it. Some of the stuff we're going to talk about today that I think is pretty niche and specific to the data that True's collecting on job seekers, particularly out of the relativity ecosystem. So check this out. And look, if you've got feedback for us about what you'd like to see in that jobs report that you think is missing, reach out to us here at True. We always want to hear your feedback. If you didn't attend our webinar the week before last with relativity, we're going to cover some of the data that was presented in that webinar from a slightly different angle, specifically around how people are scoring themselves in terms of confidence on the True relativity self-assessment, which is now required by almost 95% of our customers to accompany a resume when an applicant through True is applying for a job. So if relativity is involved. So if you didn't see that webinar, check it out. Really interesting webinar. I really appreciate Danielle and Parker, who were wonderful partners with us and shared with us a lot of information about what to expect about AI within the relativity ecosystem, both in terms of the technology, but more specifically, how it will be tested on in terms of their certification. And it was really enlightening for me to hear that it's not going to be one singular certification on air. It's rather going to be baked into lots of different certifications within the relativity ecosystem, and AI will be part of all of them in a variety of different ways. And we'll unpack where and what ways on today's webinar, some of which many of you have already have the skill set for that aren't in air, but are already in other parts of relativity, both server and one. So you can see that here, but we're going to cover some of that data today. And then the last thing to kind of say, we always show our top 5 hottest jobs. We've sort of highlighted just how many attorney-focused jobs we've seen come to market over the last month. So the data we're covering here in November is data that we saw from October and previous. In December, we'll cover this month's data. And you can see here, many of these are still open. There's a lot of law firms looking for attorneys, a couple of vendors as well, but most of these are law firm positions. And you can see here that you're starting to get the sense that some of these law firms are looking for either a hybrid mix of leadership for large-scale review and review management, or technical review leadership, or technical review execution, sometimes with a bent on AI or technology-assisted review, mixed with the ability to negotiate TAR protocol and interpret subpoenas and work with external vendors, and somewhat manage the life cycle of a discovery process. So lots of work out there for attorneys, particularly ones that are leaning more to the technology bend.
Love that.
Here's what's trending right now. I can tell you I've heard from at least 6 different lit support director/managers who got very big raises this month for 2025. And if you ask me what they all had in common, it was that
What do they all have in common, Jared?
they all have that they are involved in some sort of innovation committee or working group. They are involved in innovation, whether it's e-discovery innovation or legal firm ops innovation or servicing customers and clients who have demand for innovation or helping attorneys make smarter decisions about how to integrate certain AI technology. These are the people that are getting the biggest raises. And I don't just mean like 10, 15, 20% raise. I'm seeing some like 40, 50% raises because of the impact that they're having. Yes.
Is it just raises, or are they also moving into more of an innovation role?
It is just raises and the beginning of engaging in the conversation with the partnership about what to call them down the road. Yeah.
Awesome. And
I think those conversations are happening. I don't think they're codified everywhere. And I think, quite frankly, a lot of these people were happy to get the raises. And so, like, you know, pick and choose your battle.
Let me just say,
yeah, I don't need the title too. Not yet. Right.
Yeah. So question for you there. Why is it ESI leaders? And there's a reasoning for my question. So
yeah, so I think a couple of things. The first of which is they're trusted. A lot of these people, in fact, all of the people I'm talking about have been at their firms for well over 5, 6, 7 years, some of them more than 10 years, right? So they're trusted. That's first. So when the firm has to take risk on something involving institutional risk, they want the seal of approval from people who they trust the most. And the e-discovery leaders are not only trusted, but they're also deeply entrenched in the technology that their customers rely on, right? Not their exclusively internal professionals, but their customers rely on. And so for those reasons, I think they're a natural go-to. But I think also, let's not underestimate that these people are very influential within the firm. And some of that has to do with tenure and entrenchment, but not just, right? Because there are other people in the firm that have longer tenure than e-discovery leaders who are not being included in these innovation agendas. And I think that's because e-discovery people have a lot of influence. And the hardest thing with getting technology adoption in law firms, is most people would attest to, is first you've got to educate, then you got to evangelize, then you got to actually get adoption. So who's out there on the front lines of things, evangelizing and educating? I think they're leaning into e-discovery leadership to do that because I think people listen.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
So just sort of earlier to our point about staff attorneys and ESI attorney roles are now in abundance. We saw that with this earlier slide. And I think this is the gateway towards the Gen AI part of e-discovery for attorneys who are not rainmakers, not partner track attorneys, not already part of those practice groups. How do I get out of the trenches of e-discovery, or how do I ensure a future in e-discovery with elevated potential? This to me is the gateway, right? So if you're trying to get your hands on AI tech, or you're getting involved in more technology assisted review type of work, you're developing those workflows, I'd encourage you to consider the market, because there's a lot of law firms that are going to be hiring for that skill set in the next 12 months.
Jared, just want to back up for 1 second.
Yeah.
So those significant increases, I mean, I'm also seeing like job postings where director level, you don't see them a lot, but when you do, I see those numbers, you know, really. I used to be in that role, so I can see like there's been a significant increase. But my question is, does it fit into a particular segment of the market? Are those like the AmLaw 50, you know, the second half of the AmLaw, small, medium, large, whatever?
It's AmLaw 200.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's AmLaw 200. I think it's all over the board, right? Some of them are like AmLaw top 10. We're working on an AmLaw top 5 manager level role right now for a lit support manager. It's all over the board. You know, look, quick salary range, quick pro quo on the salary ranges. Managers are generally being hired anywhere from 250 to 300, depending on how big a firm they are and how big a department they're managing. Usually, if you're getting into double-digit people management, it's on the higher end of that. Directors are anywhere from 275 to 3.25, maybe 350. But that's a point of hire. There are people that are making significantly more than that, and probably some making meaningfully less who aren't shifting jobs, right? But that's also why some of these people are getting raises, Mike, because they haven't gotten raises to equivocate the market rates I've just given you, because they've been in those jobs getting 2 to 3% increases for 5 to 7 years, and now they're woefully behind where the market point of hire rate is. And I think firms wisely are afraid of attrition, because there's the possibility we're going to start seeing people looking for hybrid e-discovery / AI, Gen AI innovation roles operationally in late 2025, 26, 27. And they are wise to recalibrate to compensate for retention as much as they are wise to consider, should I be looking externally to go acquire that talent? I think most people are focused on retention at the top than they are at hiring outside from within at the top. Now, we want to talk about the middle of the market, totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Get it. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to.
No. I mean, these are important trends and things for us to make clear. Yeah. And look, it's good advice for those that aren't getting the big raises, right? That feel that they're being undervalued. Maybe getting more involved in the innovation of the firm and putting your hand up and volunteering for these things. And I will tell you, for better or for worse, you kind of have to go do it and prove it and show value before you're going to get the raise, before you're going to get the increase in this economic climate. And that's not going to change based on US election results, right? I can tell you that. Like, it's not like these results are now, everybody's purse strings are suddenly loosey-goosey. No way. People are very thoughtful about spend, just as much, if not more so, as they were before the results. So this third bullet point, I think, is a really amazing one. Some of you may have seen the press a couple of weeks ago about Robert Keeling from Sidley Austin and his practice group of 7 moving over to Redgrave. Some of you may have seen the news last week that Rose Jones and a number of her practice group from King and Spalding moved over to Hilgers
Graven.
Sorry. This is a new era for rainmakers in the e-discovery space. This is a clear valuation from the market that e-discovery drives business and drives decisions, and those that have cultivated tremendously reputable practices are now looking for the best possible place to grow their practice. And I think we're going to see more partners like this making moves like this to other firms. And I think, very interestingly enough, we're going to see them moving from much larger firms to more boutique and mid-sized firms for a variety of different reasons. But this is no longer an isolated event. This is a trend. And I think good for e-discovery, really good for e-discovery, right? It's putting e-discovery as a value that makes a buyer decide where they're going to give their business to outside counsel. And I don't think we knew that and could say that with assertion the way we can with those two partners and the wealth of reputation that they bring with them wherever they go.
So we have a question.
Pause right there. Great question.
Yeah. Does this mean that big law doesn't appreciate ESI lawyers and practice as much? Not doing e-discovery just merits counsel?
Well, I mean, let's keep it real.
Right.
Here's what happened. Let's talk about history lesson, okay? Because we lived through it. And maybe the person asking this question did too, but let me frame it for you from my perspective. E-discovery cost a certain amount, and people thought e-discovery was going to become its own separate practice group inside every major law firm, kind of similarly to how privacy and cybersecurity have become their own separate practice groups within AmLaw. We all thought that's what e-discovery was going to do. Then the Great Recession occurred of 2008. And the pricing on e-discovery bottomed out in the vendor space. I'm talking, I remember when people were charging $1,500 a gig to process data, $2,500 if it was European data, to process data in 2004, 2005, 2006, and that dropped to like $50 in 06, or I'm sorry, 08, 09. And as we all know, it's down to nothing sometimes. So you have to keep in mind that that economy shifted the way that law firms thought about the value of e-discovery, because they had invested in building these litigation support departments that were these huge profit centers, both from an attorney billable hour and a data billable hour or gig billable. And that economy changed between 2008 and 2010. And as that economy changed, law firms started pushing the work out to vendors. And that's when all the jobs and all the work started going with vendors. Then 3 years later, we saw the adoption of managed services as the norm for getting the best possible pricing and the best possible commitment long-term over years period of time from vendors getting it from their customers, whether corporate or law firm. It started with law firms. Then they moved to selling directly to corporate in order to lock them in. And I say all of this to say that we didn't become practice groups that were isolated from litigation within the AmLaw 200. We became things everybody had to know as part of doing business, and the profitability changed about 15 years ago from what it was the 15 years prior. And as a result, no, we haven't seen law firms, all of them, value it the same way that they might value somebody with a book of business in a practice area where you have high partner and associate billable hours with high margins, right? Highly profitable margins versus high volume in discovery work with maybe lower margins and higher overhead, but when done in the appropriate amount of volume, wildly profitable, right? Top and bottom line. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in billable revenue for the top line, as opposed to, you know, tens of millions. I don't know if that's a good answer to the question, but that's my perspective.
Mike, any thoughts or feedback on that?
I mean, I get it. It kind of, you know, comports with what I saw over the years in my law firm career. And I admittedly, I'm a little bit removed from it nowadays, but I follow things and I have friends, and obviously I still think and talk about it. And it's been interesting to watch. And I don't think that law firms value it less. I think strategically they're just, what's the word? What's the phrase? I want to say something like picking their battles, right?
Well, don't misunderstand me, Mike. I don't think anybody values it. Well, it's not that they value it less. It's that some value it more than others.
I like that.
Yeah.
And that's what I think these moves are about, right? Hilgersgraben, Redgrave, these are firms that market themselves as we are the best and we focus on this, right? You're not going to come to us for tax. You're not going to come to us for real estate. You're coming to us for this.
Right.
And that has created a space for people to focus on that value. And that ability to focus on the value is good for us as an industry.
Who would have thought e-discovery becoming a specialty? Huh. I make that.
I mean, it's been a specialty for a
because
while. E-discovery being the reason why somebody gives you their legal business.
No, I make that joke because we're an educational organization that specializes in e-discovery for 15 years.
Yeah. All right, Garrett, we've got 10 more minutes.
All right. 85% of the job seekers who accepted positions last month had multiple offers at the point of hire. That's a really high rate. It goes to show you that the market's getting more competitive. Hiring managers are now competing for the same individuals for similarly titled and paid positions. And everybody should expect this competition to increase, which is likely going to lead to salaries increasing in order to win that competition over the next 3 to 6 months.
Which also means we need to get talent with some expertise in some areas, which leads us into some of the things that you're going to talk about.
Well, that's this next bullet point exactly, is new contract and vendor job opportunities hit an all-time 6-month or hit a 6-month high in October, right? And a lot of that is because they're getting big projects now. Litigation is increasing. I think this is tied to what I know you were maybe going to touch upon, which is election results. I think one of the things around election results that's going to be very positive for e-discovery is in a deregulated culture, right? And we can expect that from this next administration, at least in contrast to the current one. We're likely going to see more deregulation and probably not an increase in a regulatory scrutiny. But as history tells us, that usually leads to an increase in private sector litigation, decrease in public sector internal investigations. So people are going to start suing each other a lot more, and that's going to mean more e-discovery business, and that could be really good for our industry, right? Litigation increases, so does the demand for e-discovery, and as these big projects come in, what we're seeing a lot of service providers choose is, which they have not for the past 2 years, is, okay, big project, contractors. For the most part, vendors have said, nope, I'm going to hire nobody. And if I'm going to hire anybody, it's going to be full time. And I'm just going to put more work on the people I have because I need to keep my margins high and I need to keep my profitability high in an uncertain economic time, which we've been in for 2 years, right? It's been a down economy for 2 years. As things swing back, we're seeing them say, nope, let me get contractors because I don't want to hire this many full-time people because I can't see the horizon past 6 months, 12 months, a year, or whatever that project is. And so let me augment with contractors, cherry pick maybe a few that I want to become full-time employees if I need them, but let me keep my perpetual bottom line as free as possible for many of them because I have an exit plan for the next 2 to 3 years. And if you're a vendor and you have an exit strategy and you're looking to get acquired or acquire other companies in order to scale and get acquired, you're looking to keep your bottom line and your perpetual full-time employees at an absolute minimum so that you don't have to fire people 6 months before you sell. Right? And the best way to do that, contractors. And we're seeing vendors choose that modality pretty frequently over the last 2 months, but it spiked in October.
And just for anybody who hasn't been around as long as I have, deregulation absolutely leads to an increase in litigation. So yeah, it's coming.
So it's good for us.
It's good. It's not that, look, as many of you know, I work in the privacy sector too, and I sort of broke this news to a lot of CPOs when I spoke at the Chief Privacy Officer Forum at Consero last week in Miami. And I was like, look, guys, like if you're a privacy program and you're holistically focused on compliance and you're in a deregulated industry, please don't expect to get a ton of budget to grow your privacy program under this administration. Nobody's going to be worried about that. Forget about the fact that the regulators in privacy have no teeth. We're never going to get a federal privacy law in the next 4 years, and probably not an AI federal law either. So you've got to figure out how to make an impact on the business that's not about keeping everything compliant and avoiding financial risk on fines, because no one's afraid of that in corporate America, and they're not going to be for the next 4 years. What they might be afraid is that someone's going to sue them for trademark infringement, or someone's going to sue them for stealing IP of their AI models and implementing it in another business, leading to customer, departure. Right? That is a business problem. And the more that people that are in-house in corporate, whether you're e-discovery, privacy, or cyber, focus on solving business problems as opposed to cost reduction or risk-related mitigation, you're going to find you get people's attention. And for me, the gateway to that is AI, because they don't understand it, but they know some friend somewhere that got somebody to create some amazing little gadget that did something that saved them a bunch of time, effort, energy, or money. Right?
Yep.
So what gadget are you creating? Maybe.
Yes.
Perfect segue into the next section.
All right, we've got 7 minutes. I'm going to show a ton of data here. So some of this is from Relativity. This just shows you Relativity 1 adoption over the last 7 years, almost. You could see how few people, only 19%, had Rel 1 between the years of 2018 and 2020. And these are taken from those Relativity self-assessments that True developed in partnership with Relativity. We've had over 4,000 job seekers fill them out over the last 5 years, and that's where that data comes from. You could see here 21 to 23, the Great Resignation, 64% of people now had Rel 1 experience, and they were looking to leverage it in order to make a strategic job move during the peak of the Great Resignation, where people were getting 25 to 40% increases in base compensation. Flash forward to the last 2 years, as we've been in somewhat of a job recession, you could see that only 50% of job seekers have Rel 1. But I could tell you that that makes sense to us here at True, because so many of those people that are in the 45% of not having Rel 1 and are still on enterprise are looking in order to find jobs to get Rel 1 experience, because they know that that's going to make them more competitive as job seekers. And they know that that's also going to be what gets them potentially into a major law firm, most of whom are using Relativity 1 or planning to do so at this point. So this is the adoption, and this is, I think, really compelling. This is what it leads to. Next slide. This is what it leads to, which is 53% of the jobs that were filled this year that we're tracking have been at law firms. This is the first time in 10 years that we've ever seen more jobs filled at law firms than at vendors. It shows you not just how many law firms are adopting Rel 1 and staffing in order to execute on the technology adoption, but just how lean the vendors are in comparison to the onesie, twosie, threesie hiring that most law firms are doing. shows you just how lean they are in terms of their hiring and corporate.
I think it also reflects the pendulum swinging back, right?
Correct. As things move in-house, so do the jobs, right? But we've seen Rel 1 adoption from law firms now for a few years. Now we're seeing the staff to come in and really execute on delivery. If we go to the next slide, which is maybe the most important one I wanted to get to, this is actually scoring based on these 4,000 applicants, how people score themselves with either no experience, some experience, advanced, or expert in all these facets of relativity. And what's fascinating here is Danielle and Parker on my webinar identified two really core areas that they were like, well, these are the most AI-like things already in our ecosystem. One was using case dynamics, which is second to the bottom, and the other was creating relativity dynamic objects. If those are the most AI-like skill sets, right? And we look at what over 4,000 people scored themselves, you'll see that only 7% of people scored themselves as experts using case dynamics, and only 12% of people scored themselves as experts creating relativity dynamic objects. So if you're a job seeker and you're saying to yourself, what skills should I learn to be more competitive, to have a value that a lot of other job seekers do not feel that they have? Well, here you go. Look at the expert column and chase the red and yellow, because that's where we're seeing job seekers don't have confidence. Where job seekers have tons of confidence is in configuring and using relativity workflows, is in creating custom workloads in fields. You're not going to differentiate yourself as much as a job seeker with the stuff that's in green over here at the expert level. You're going to differentiate yourself with the stuff that's in red. And ironically, the stuff that's in red is the stuff that relativity considers the most AI-centric skill sets. Because we're short on time, I just want to go to the next slide and then I'll let you guys comment.
Jared,
I just want to point out that one
Yeah.
point, if you go back really quickly, is also the automated workflows, which we've been talking about for several years, but is also, right, before we even started talking about Gen AI, we started talking about automated workflows. And I'm so surprised that that number is still
14%, right? 14%. So you could see, like, chase these skills. You want to separate yourself. Here's where you're going to chase the skills. People will pay more for these skills. They're harder to find. Not as many people have them. Go one more slide.
And Jared, relativity error just didn't make it because it's so new, right? It's not a factor in that.
It's here. It's at the bottom of this slide right here. You can see it's now on the checklist. We didn't have 4,000 people fill this out because it is so new. But over the last like 8 months, I think we've had it on. You could see only 2% of people score themselves expert, and 68% have zero experience using air. So, you know, part of the reason why we're saying this is important is because this is going to flip. This was the same stat that Rel 1 had back in 2016, 17, or 17, 18, right? If you scored people on Rel 1, it would score like air scores on this chart. But if you flash forward now, 68% of people have Rel 1. So 5 years from now, you're going to see these numbers and these colors do a 180 and flip. The question is, what side of the coin are you going to be on?
I love that. Awesome. What's next?
So we're running out of time. We did a real quick refresher here of remote versus hybrid, just to show you how few jobs are fully remote anymore. They're hard to come by, but it did go up from the high 20s to about 30%. And that's because contract jobs went up. So as the vendors started hiring more, vendors are more remote. As contract jobs went up, contract jobs are usually fully remote. That's why remote jobs went up. So just because you see our fully remote jobs going up, don't expect those to be FTEs. They're mostly contractors. Here's contract versus direct hire. You could see what an uptick from Q3 totals to now just October. It jumped from 25 to 45% of jobs that were accepted were contract. Also, timeline is everything, right? Some of these clients don't have 6 weeks for an FTE to wait, get their bonus, give notice, 2 weeks. No, they got work now. So a lot of FTEs want to start in January at this point, which is why a lot of people are choosing contract. So contract always increases for us at the end of the year for that exact reason, if the market is busy. And you can see that trend sort of playing out here. Money has now moved up into the #1 slot for the first time in 14 months. Burnout had held the #1 slot. It seems to me like e-discovery people, as they often do, have said, I accept the burnout, now just pay me for my time. And a lot of people are coming to us saying, I haven't gotten big raises. I'm ready to make a move. Help me find more. And that's pretty much, I think, it. Salaries haven't changed. For those of you just watching the recording and the playback, here's law firms. If we go one more, we can see the vendors. These have not really changed in any meaningful way from last month. And I think that's it, everybody. I know we're at the hour. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you're new. I answer everybody who reaches out to me. You'll get a response. If you haven't filled out our relativity self-assessment, do so. That helps us really understand the market. And I think these metrics we're going to make available on a blog with ACEDS. Maybe not today, but in the next, before Thanksgiving, we'll have these charts that you saw on this if you want to take a deeper dive available to everybody.
Next week. And that's to say, so we want to say happy Thanksgiving to everyone in the US. And I think what do we have a various number of other holidays that we're going to be starting quite quickly. Ediscovery Day, our biggest holiday, is coming up on December 5th. So we hope everyone will join us. There's a landing page on our website with lots of details, all types of events that we're hosting. And Jared, Mike, and I will be back next month to talk about how you prep for 2025. And we've got some changes coming in January. So we'll have a special guest joining me, Mike, and Jared in January. And you'll start to see a new guest every month for all of 2025. So stay tuned for that. We'll start to announce it. We hope you can join us. Oh, and one last thing for anyone. ACEDS membership, certification, and training all go on sale next week for the holidays because we love our community. So 30% all of next week. If you need to get any information, reach out to me. And again, connect with all of our chapters. And we can't wait to see you next month.
Thanks, everybody. Great job, Jared.